Welcome back to another episode of the Unscripted Pharmacist. I'm joined here today with Chris Stevenson and Lenora Casey. Where here at the Unscripted Pharmacist, we believe that patient education is the way to reverse this epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes. We believe that using technology that is state-of-the-art, along with health coaching, can help guide a patient through the difficult journey back to better health. Today I want to get kind of into a deep dive of what we've been doing here with the Unscripted Pharmacist with monitoring blood sugars and seeing its effect on people's lifestyle. I have two guinea pigs. For the last 2 weeks, we've had Lenora Casey and Chris Stevenson working on their continuous glucose monitor and seeing how their foods affect their blood sugar. So anyways, we started looking at their numbers, and then they started asking questions like, well, what's normal? Well, what really is normal blood sugars, right? Do we really know? Like, everyone's kind of been reduced kind of to a number, one number, an A1C. But, like, where does that come from? What's normal? So today I thought we'd share a couple graphs.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Explain a little bit about what A1C is exactly, because we tend to know what blood sugar is, and we have a number that's somewhere between, like, I don't know, 90 and 140 and somewhere, but A1C is a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, it is a little bit more, if you don't know what your A1C is, you definitely need to learn what it is. And yeah, we've kind of been reduced to that number, and it's an average. Okay.
An average of.
An average of what your glucose levels is.
Okay.
Over the past 3 months or so.
Over the past 3 months, but I would also say it's kind of like a measure of the stickiness, the stickiness of your blood, and how well does it stick to proteins. Because this is really the crux of the problem with type 2 diabetes is the stickiness. Everything gets sticky and glycated, so that's why we call it hemoglobin, the glycosylated hemoglobin, which is the red blood cell, which has a lifespan of 90 to 120 days. So anyways, So what happens? So if you look at our first graphic of what exactly is type 2 diabetes, which is where really essentially it's the blue line, where if you look at blood sugars continue to rise, even though the insulin levels, it wasn't enough to keep the glucose levels normal. And finally, and this doesn't happen in everybody, but they finally become diabetic where the blood sugar finally starts rising.
All right, so you hinted at insulin resistance there. So let's...
Oh, a little bit? Yes,
okay. So, yeah,
right.
More insulin that you get over the course of your lifetime, which is related to how many carbohydrates and how many sugars and processed starches and such. The more insulin you get, the more resistant that insulin is to driving down your blood sugar.
Right, and that's kind of a genetic factor. It's like, why do some people get type 2 diabetes and some don't? Some people have this outward appearance of type 2 diabetes, some don't. It kind of comes down to where do you store your energy? Where do you store it very well? Are you good at storing energy, or are you lousy at it? Okay, so that's kind of like that genetic factor that makes kind of a difference. But if you look at type 2 diabetes, really it's too much insulin. And you have such significant amount of insulin resistance, you've got to bring your insulin levels to normal, back down to normal. Type 1, you don't have enough, you got to bring it back up. Type 2, you have to bring it down. But finally, your blood sugar gets elevated when the insulin that you make isn't enough. That's when you finally see the blood sugar starting to rise. And so if you look at the normal response of a diabetic to carbohydrates, say, in the next slide, we see that a diabetic has much more of a significant response to carbohydrates. They're already elevated. So in this graph, they go from a blood sugar of probably like 170 all the way up to well over 300, and then they come back down. So this would indicate that you'd have a much higher A1C. And if you look at our, all right, so here's the different responses of glucose to the different types of foods. Carbohydrates have a massive response of glucose when we eat carbohydrates. Proteins, our glucose response is much minimal, and fat, pretty much no response of glucose, and I would even add insulin. So you can say glucose and insulin are kind of the same here.
All right,
Carbohydrates cause a spike in glucose as well as insulin.
So we see,
protein not to,
yeah, all right, thank you. We see here that the carbohydrates increase our blood sugar the most of the three macronutrients
for
that
sure,
we see there.
for sure.
But are there some carbohydrates that are worse than others? So we're thinking about what we might eat or not eat.
Right. So
Give me a little
we are
indication.
really trying to avoid the foods that really raise glucose levels very rapidly. We call those high glycemic index foods, high GI foods. And those are ones that essentially that the glucose or the carbohydrates go into solution right now, which is sweetened things, sweetened beverages, right? Juice,
Yeah.
soda pop, all right?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, right? Which you are intimately aware of, which
Yes.
is awesome. So when you see these foods that go into solution very rapidly that cause a huge spike in insulin, that's where we get the insulin resistance. That's where we get these huge fluctuations, and we see the spike at the bottom, where you actually start dropping. Your blood sugar, after a big spike, actually gets lower afterwards.
Yeah, we call that a crash.
Oh, we call the sugar crash for sure.
Yeah.
So here's our A1C chart. If you look at what is a normal pre-diabetic versus a diabetic, you're looking at a blood sugar of 117 to 137 is a pre-diabetic. Diabetic is over, their average blood sugar is over 137. So these are just, it's not like you woke up one morning and all of a sudden your blood sugar is above 137.
You have to creep up to that.
It takes a
But-
while to
yes.
creep up to that, for sure.
But I'm totally in that pre-diabetic range, so I'm like I've told you before,
Right.
I'm your target audience here. I'm
sure.
the guy that was addicted to the Coca-Colas and the sugars, and by the way, it is an addiction.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been measuring my blood sugar recently,
Yeah.
and I found that my baseline blood sugar, or my average blood sugar now, is easily over 117. Puts me
Yeah.
in the pre-diabetic range, and I don't look,
Like you would have a problem. How would
I
you
don't
know, right?
Yeah. All right. At one point, I had more of a male pattern beer belly, but
Yeah.
it's going away thanks to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
But I'm not obese. I get some exercise, and yet, like so many Americans, I'm pre-diabetic, and I'm destined to be diabetic. If I don't do something about it, then I better do something about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you'll find is you could have a normal A1C, right? But what does it really mean? Your blood sugar could be bouncing all over the place.
And mine does.
Yeah.
So the A1C is an average.
Yes.
But I go way up. I go well over 200 easily. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I crash down to like 60 and I
Yeah.
start getting shaky.
Yeah.
Okay. But my A1C
Yeah.
is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're golden, right? You don't need to worry about
So
it.
I definitely have to worry about it.
I am such a believer in the CGM as a meaningful tool to be able to say, hey, you've got a problem.
Okay. We've hinted at what a CGM is.
Yeah.
Continuous glucose
Yeah,
monitor.
continuous glucose
Right.
monitor. If you can, I think we have some Freestyle Libre slides that we could throw up there.
Right.
Yeah, here's the Freestyle Libre. This is what it is. So it's the size of a quarter, and it Bluetooths with your phone, or it Bluetooths with a reader. And in that, what it can do is tell you what your blood sugar is constantly. So you have to scan it every 8 hours. All right, so it's the size of a quarter. You slap it onto your arm.
We happen to have one.
Yeah.
okay.
And we happen to have one. I mean, both of us have them on.
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
So this is
Show
what
us
it
your
looks like.
CGM.
Yes.
I love it. And it goes on the back of your arm.
It goes on the back of your arm,
perfect.
and you're fat, and there's
Right.
a catheter that's in there that goes into the the tissue, and then constantly reads what your blood sugar is
Yeah. On your phone.
on your phone. Right.
There's
on
a
your
graph.
phone.
Tells you what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I get the data,
Yes.
and I can see it,
Right.
and I get to make some cool remarks and kind
I know.
of check it out. But we can see. I think it's the window to the soul. I think it's.
So this is
Well, it's
this
the
is
beginning of looking
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
everybody's like metabolic,
Oh, but it's things that you wouldn't realize affect your blood sugar.
right.
Almost
Yeah.
everything you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't realize
it all affects your blood sugar.
I had no idea that fruits and fruit juices
Yeah.
drive my blood sugar just as much
They're
as a
sugar.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's fructose in
Right.
fruit, in the same way that I have high fructose corn syrup in my Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Isn't
so
it crazy?
oh, hey, fruits, that's healthy.
You think?
Yeah,
I know.
Think, yeah.
But,
think.
yes, it drives that blood sugar way up there.
And then what happened afterwards?
Oh, so I get the big crash after I've had, say, a glass of fruit juice, and then my blood sugar dips down to somewhere around 60 or below,
Right.
and I get shaky, okay?
Yeah.
And some people get hungry at that point, ravenously hungry. I'm maybe a little bit different. We're all individuals, but I don't get hungry, but cognitively I know, all right, I'm shaky. I just had a big bowl of whatever that caused my blood sugar to go up. I know that I'm crashing, and I should eat, okay? So that's when I do, and and being the idiot that I can be sometimes, I overeat.
You're like, oh my gosh,
Again.
make this shakiness go away. That's the
Yeah.
only thing you can do, right? And
Yeah.
you're just treating that shakiness.
And then
Yeah.
I get another spike and another crash, another spike and another crash, and there goes my variability is extremely wide, okay, but my ANC is fine.
Right.
Okay. But let's get back to the
Well, I want to
continuous glucose
piggyback
level.
on that because
Okay,
I think
go
it's
ahead.
important because I think it's like what drives these cravings. So that's the ultimate question.
Oh.
I think the brain doesn't really like these huge fluctuations. I don't think it likes the big drop. When you talk about that crash, that's probably when you're not feeling really good.
It's true.
I think emotionally, mentally, you're probably not feeling very well.
No,
Yeah,
you
I
don't.
do. I'm not the guy that has wide swings of emotions
Oh.
and moods and hunger and such.
I do.
Somehow I miss that. However,
I do.
Okay.
I mean, I'll admit it. I'm crazy. If
Yeah.
I eat something sugary and a couple hours later, I'm like angrier.
Yeah, I want to show that in the next episode. I think that's really cool.
Hang
I thought
on.
your reaction was
Yeah.
really cool. I want to show all kinds of cool stuff like emotion and stress and
Yeah.
all these things. But I think that this is data we don't have.
it's
I think
new.
this
It's
is
certainly new.
It's very new, but it's imagine having a number like if you saw on that graph, it says 112 and you know which direction you're going. What if you're going? What if you're 112 and you're going straight up versus 112 going sideways or straight down? It's so much more meaningful. How many finger sticks? You guys, this hurts. I feel so
know.
sorry for diabetics that would have to. To do that constantly,
Right.
many
the
times a
wearable
day.
is you do it once and you're done, and
Right.
it's good for 2 weeks.
Right. Or you're like me, you measured, you're eating some food and you started off with a blood sugar of 90, and then an hour and a half, 2 hours later, you measure your blood sugar is 60, and you missed the whole lesson because there was a huge spike in there,
Yeah.
right? Imagine how much data is missed.
Yeah.
This brings that data
Because
to
you
light.
think you're fine.
Yeah.
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 Because everyone said that this was the right
Right.
food. I always say, man, the proof is in the scans. You can talk to me all day long about, oh, this food and this food's good, this food's bad. It's like, well, we know the carbohydrates are probably something we should probably avoid, but do you really know what it does? I don't know. There's so many different variables that go into these CGMs.
Yeah, because forever we were taught to eat the food pyramid, which was a lot of carbohydrates and
Oh, yeah.
and very little fats. That we were told, don't eat the fats because they'll
Right.
give you cholesterol, you'll have a heart attack. Yeah, so we were eating these tremendous amounts of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
We still are. It's what we were taught. It's what our doctor said was okay. Our nutritionists and dietitians were fine with that. Even for diabetics, they were telling them to eat quite a few carbohydrates. Like if you go into a grocery store now, you see these aisles that are just like the sugar sweetened beverage aisle, like the soft drink aisle.
Yeah.
It's huge, okay?
Oh,
the
massive.
ice cream aisle is huge,
Oh, yeah.
okay? So when you
How many feet do you have? I always gauge, how many feet of juice do you have?
Yeah,
Like, that's
Lots
a
of
lot.
those.
You have like 30 feet of juice.
we do. And
Yes.
the bakery, the cakes and cookies and the brownies aisle,
Yeah.
all of those things, and the rice and the pastas, all of these are carbohydrates, which drive our
Right.
blood sugar up, which gives us a higher
It
insulin.
makes you kind of wonder, do they really want us to know what your blood sugar is? Because if you knew, would you still be eating it? That's the ultimate question.
So if I was in the food business, I would not want you to know. Okay?
No,
but I'm
you
not.
probably
I'm-
wouldn't be happy with that.
I'm in the medical business. I definitely want you to know.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because every spike causes that inflammation. Not to mention stickiness to proteins. And then the ultimate question is like, if you look at a blood sugar, a normal blood sugar, what we've experienced, even just going from 70 to 170, that's 100 grams, right? Or that's a drop. That's an increase of 100 grams per milligrams per deciliter. That's a jump of 100. I'm only looking at 5 grams of carbohydrates.
Okay, this is an important
And if
point.
I had 75 grams of a sweet juice, where's the other 70?
Okay, you're making a great point here, and people watching need to pay. If you tuned away for a second, all right, listen to this.
Yeah.
He's saying that 5 grams of carbohydrates will raise your blood sugar
100
points.
100
How
points.
much is 5 grams?
100 to 200. If you look at the total volume of blood in the body, and if you have and you know how many grams of carbohydrates that you're eating, right? Or how many grams of carbs you have, there's only 5 grams circulating at any given time.
Okay, but
Hardly
what
much.
is-
That is 1 teaspoon. It's hardly
what I'm going
anything.
for.
1
Yeah.
teaspoon is nothing.
It's
Yes.
1 bite of an apple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at an apple, it's 15 grams typically of carbohydrates.
Okay, so maybe 2
And
bites of an
even
apple.
if an apple took you from 100 to 200, and that was only 5 grams,
Yeah.
where's the other 10 grams?
Yeah, that's like
It had
3
to be used,
spoonfuls of
right?
oatmeal.
It had to be used up and burnt up immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be stored in the form of glycogen immediately, or it was converted into the ever so feared fat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So, unfortunately, most of the carbohydrates that we eat, especially if it's not necessary and you don't need it, it's got to get converted to fat.
Right.
We call that de novo lipogenesis. You are making fat from glucose. So, are we really what we eat?
Yeah.
We are.
Where have we gotten this one wrong, right? Eat fat, you get fat. Like it's so,
Yeah.
it's the total opposite, right? It's maybe eat excess carbs and now you're fat, right? And there's a huge, very important concept in there, which is the whole insulin, which we don't see. We kind of make this this assumption that glucose and insulin are kind of equal to each other. But we know that there's different types of people. But we can kind of make that difference and say, well, hey, if your glucose levels are high because you ate something that was full of carbohydrates, that your insulin level is probably elevated as well. And you're out of ketosis, right?
Right.
We're not burning fat anymore. It's switched your energy source. As soon as you eat some carbohydrates, fat burning is over.
Okay, so what drives fat burning and what turns off the fat burning?
Insulin, carbohydrates, turn on fat storage and turn off fat burning. When insulin is gone, you have the opposite effect. Now you're burning fat.
Okay,
So with the insulin, right?
Yeah.
That means the sugar or the carbs that you're intaking, which then increases the insulin, which then converts the glucose to fat. That's
Correct.
what you're trying to say.
That
Okay.
insulin is the most important hormone in that conversion of glucose to
Right.
fat. We call that de novo lipogenesis. We're making fat from glucose. Insulin is right there.
Right.
That's
Has
the little
lots
piece
and
of the
lots of
puzzle that allows and turns on that enzyme that says, make fat,
Okay.
store energy. And it stops you from burning it. That's another enzyme on the other side of the cell membrane that's stopped by insulin. See how important insulin is?
Yeah.
See how important carbohydrates are?
Right.
Yeah.
Because we make that assumption, right?
But you once told me insulin is the miracle grow for fat. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's fat cell fertilizer.
Oh, I like
it
that.
makes cells big.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it's excellent at making everything bigger, whether you like it or not. To the point, it doesn't really care until the point that if you don't have enough healthy fat cells that can expand, you will now get to the point where fat cells will expand and start leaking. And this is the problem that you see with diabetics. Why do they have this hyperlipidemia, this problem with their lipids?
Okay.
And they're diabetic. I thought diabetes was all about sugar. Well, what's going on? Okay, well, when the fat cells are resistant finally, now you're leaking fat into the bloodstream. And that's why we see triglycerides elevated and HDL low. We see more fat in the bloodstream because you've got more leaky fat cells.
Oh, okay.
And this is a genetic difference too between people, unfortunately. Some people, you store energy really well. That's good for you. Subcutaneous fat, stuff that jiggles, it's probably more protective versus the beer belly. That doesn't move very well. It doesn't jiggle. If it's on the inside of that abdominal wall, that's danger. Danger, Will. Danger.
Danger, Will Robinson. Yes. I like
So
it.
how does it make it dangerous? I think that maybe patients would want to know.
You're having excess fat inside the bloodstream. The body has to deal with, right? It's got to clean it up. It's like the garbage patrol, right? And cleaning up those arteries and getting that fat out of there is the role of the trash master, which is HDL.
Okay.
That's got to take it. It's got to clean it up, sweep it up, clean it up, and take it back for processing, for recycling. But unfortunately, that's a big job. So it's overwhelmed. And that's why HDL is so low.
It's so low.
And so you'll have an accumulation of, unfortunately, a certain type of LDL particle, which we call small dense LDL, that drives that input of fat into those arteries, and arterial walls. And that causes your cardiovascular disease. So again, it's probably more about having that small dense LDL particle and that is really driven by insulin.
Okay.
And sugar intake, right? So we know that refined carbohydrates and sugar, another very toxic metabolite, which we haven't even talked about, but that certainly does drive that cardiovascular disease. So how do you know if you have a problem? Right?
Yeah.
How do you know?
You know.
You need to get a lipid profile. You need to find out what your blood sugar is as well. And seeing the CGM, it's like, how did you get in this mess in the first place? Well, you can see it.
Well, you can see it now.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the key to preventative medicine. I think it's the future of preventative medicine. Like to know what foods and what about your daily lifestyle and how it affects your glucose as well as how good you feel or not feel.
So we should mention that the Freestyle Libre, which is the kind of CGM that we each have, is available by prescription.
Yes.
Yes.
So you'll need to talk to your primary care physician about this.
True. And I would say, even if it's not covered, go get it. Pay for it.
Yeah.
It'll be the best $100 you ever spent. Okay, you'll learn so much. But I kind of think this is where the aid of having a health coach kind of guide you along. It's almost like walking through a dark room. You know, how about the person that organized the furniture in the first place be the one that guides you through, right? So having someone that points out obstacles, I think, is useful. I've been able to have a lot of success using the CGM to help patients get off of their insulin medications. Their diabetes meds, insulin. Sulfonylureas, a lot of the medications we find that aren't really that useful and that can be pretty much fixed with just food.
Okay. You use the word fixed. Is it possible, my patients have asked me this, to reverse type 2 diabetes? And I can tell you that the answer previous to the last few years was always, nope. But there is some hope in the horizon. Or is it here? Tell me about that.
Yeah. It's difficult when the current mindset is diabetes is a progressive chronic disease. That is usually when I will shut off because I will get very furious because no, I don't think it's a progressive disease. I think this is reversible, and I think food. I've seen it in so many patients. So I mean, I there's no way I could believe that it's a progressive disease. It really is something that. Healthcare practitioners have come to accept and say this is just what happens, but I think that their mindset is that you don't make enough insulin, and that's why we add insulin. And myself included, I was in that boat. I believe that eventually you weren't going to make enough insulin to be able to combat the insulin resistance, but that your beta cells died as you got older and you didn't make enough insulin, therefore you need it. No, your insulin resistance got so bad that you didn't have enough insulin. If you can reverse that insulin resistance, you change the game. Now you don't have insulin resistance, and it turns out that you make plenty of insulin, and you're able to reverse it naturally and normally. To say full reversal, that is a somewhat of a debatable concept because it's really an A1C of less than 6.5, and 5 years is considered the remission, and you're only on metformin, only one medication, because that's very debatable whether metformin, is something that we should ever take off the table. I still have patients that don't take it. I mean, that's totally up to them, but they're out to prove a message, right? They're really out to say, hey, I don't need insulin anymore. I've got a couple of really feisty patients that I just love for that. So, anyways, I don't know. Does that answer the question?
I partially, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that because of insulin resistance, okay, we find that our blood sugars will start, our baseline blood sugars, average blood sugars will start to rise, and your normal healthcare professional will prescribe for you more and more insulin, okay, in order to combat this problem. But it's a food problem, not a blood sugar problem.
Right.
It's an insulin problem that can be improved, okay,
Sure.
with a proper diet,
Right.
right?
So I agree. It's a food problem with a food cure. It's not a food problem with, hey, I've got some drugs that'll work, right? That's a commercial. That's
Right.
kind of what healthcare system or the sick care system has
Right.
been all about, is we're going to just solve symptoms, right? Oh, you got a high blood sugar, we give you insulin. Oh, you have high blood pressure, we give you we give you blood pressure medications. You have problem with your lipids, we'll put you on a statin, right? We're just using Band-Aids on bullet holes, okay? The problem is the food. If you fix the food, you fix the problem. The body knows what it needs. The body will get what it needs if you're eating the right food. And the food that is appropriate and the right stuff for us, we know because we can tell from what is a normal glucose reading. What does a normal person feel like when their blood sugar doesn't fluctuate much at all? Okay? We can see that. And that's what we can see with the continuous glucose monitor.
Right.
What a great piece of technology.
Yeah. So what should people be eating?
I would say do everything and anything you can to keep your glucose levels low. Stop the spikes. Stay away from refined carbohydrates, sugar especially. If you get that out of your life, as you're experiencing yourself,
I am.
it's the energy level is amazing when you're not on sugar. When you stop grabbing for things that make you really hungry, things that are a quick fix, and start grabbing something more sustainable, something that's higher in fat.
Right. Okay. So let's give them some examples of, the refined carbohydrates. What are
Okay,
because
that is awesome. Okay, that's a great segue into the next session, which is all about what does the foods do to our blood sugar. Which ones make it rise quicker?
Right.
Right. Which ones? How does our body respond to other things like stress and infection and whatnot? So, I think it's going to be great for the next episode, which is all about CGMs. Cool, huh?
Yeah.
So both of you guys did some experimentation, so this will be neat.